The morning of June 13th, 2025, began like any other, but it would end in national mourning. Air India Flight 171, a modern Boeing 787 Dreamliner, was scheduled for a routine flight from Ahmedabad. Shortly after taking off, the aircraft tragically crashed, impacting the ground in a devastating explosion. This horrific incident claimed the lives of 241 passengers and crew members, sending shockwaves across the country and the global aviation community. The scale of the loss was immense, with families waiting for loved ones suddenly plunged into a nightmare from which there was no waking. The crash site was a scene of utter destruction, a stark and painful reminder of the fragility of life. In the immediate aftermath, a swift and coordinated response was launched. Emergency services rushed to the scene, their efforts heroic, yet heartbreakingly limited by the severity of the crash. Hospitals in Ahmedabad were put on high alert, preparing to receive casualties and facing the grim task of identifying victims through DNA analysis. The government acted quickly, with Prime Minister Narendra Modi visiting the crash site to offer his condolences and oversee the initial response. Air India, now under the Tata Group, dispatched special assistance teams to support the affected families and announced a preliminary compensation, acknowledging the profound loss their passengers had endured. The focus was clear: provide comfort to the grieving and secure the site for investigation. This accident holds a particularly somber significance for the aviation world. It marks the first ever hull loss of a Boeing 787 Dreamliner, an aircraft celebrated for its advanced technology, safety features, and fuel efficiency. For over a decade, the 787 had maintained a flawless record with no fatal accidents, becoming a symbol of modern air travel's reliability. The crash of Flight 171 shattered that perception, raising urgent questions about what could have gone so wrong on such a sophisticated machine. The global aviation industry watched closely, understanding that the answers found in the wreckage in Ahmedabad would have far-reaching implications for airlines and manufacturers worldwide. The human cost of this tragedy is staggering. On board the flight were people from all walks of life, families on vacation, business travelers, students returning home. Each of the 241 lives lost represents a unique story cut short, a future erased. In a miraculous but bittersweet turn of events, one passenger seated in 11A survived the initial impact and subsequent explosion. This lone survivor's story, while a small beacon of hope, also underscores the sheer randomness and brutality of the disaster. As the nation grapples with this immense sorrow, the search for answers becomes not just a technical necessity, but a moral imperative owed to the victims and their families. The investigation into the cause of the Air India Flight 171 crash began almost immediately, led by India's Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, or AAIB. In line with international aviation protocols, experts from the United States NTSB and the aircraft manufacturer Boeing were invited to participate. The first crucial step was the recovery of the aircraft's black boxes, the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder. Found in the tail section, which often survives crashes best, these devices were retrieved intact. The cockpit voice recorder captures all sounds from the cockpit, including pilot conversations and warning alarms, while the flight data recorder records thousands of flight parameters, offering a detailed timeline of the aircraft's final moments. Investigators are meticulously examining several key pieces of evidence. One of the first red flags was the aircraft's unusual takeoff. Reports indicate that Flight 171 used the entire length of the runway to get airborne, which is highly abnormal for a powerful aircraft like the 787. This suggests the plane was struggling to generate enough lift or speed from the very beginning. Another critical clue is the position of the landing gear. Video footage shows the gear remained down even after the aircraft had climbed to 400 feet. Typically, pilots retract the gear almost immediately after liftoff to make the plane more aerodynamic. Leaving it down strongly suggests the crew knew they were in trouble and might have been preparing for an immediate return to the airport. The performance of the two Rolls-Royce engines is also under intense scrutiny. A dual-engine failure is extremely rare on modern jets, often described as a 1 in a million event. While the Ahmedabad airport area is known for bird activity, there is no visual evidence of a major bird strike. Furthermore, sounds captured in videos from the ground suggest the engines were still running, though perhaps not producing full power, right up until the moment of impact. Investigators will analyze engine data from the flight data recorder to determine if they were functioning correctly or if there was a loss of thrust that prevented the aircraft from climbing as it should have. Finally, a central part of the puzzle lies with the aircraft's flaps and slats. These are surfaces on the front called slats and back called flaps of the wings that extend for takeoff and landing to create more lift at slow speeds. Post-crash wreckage clearly shows the slats were extended, which is correct for takeoff. However, some grainy video footage seems to show that the flaps at the rear of the wings may have been retracted. This is a critical contradiction, as an aircraft's computers would normally sound a loud alarm and prevent takeoff if the flaps were not set correctly. Understanding this discrepancy is now a primary focus for the investigation team. As investigators piece together the evidence, a leading theory has emerged that points not to a mechanical failure, but to a tragic and deeply human error in the cockpit. This theory attempts to explain the strange combination of events, the landing gear remaining down and the potential retraction of the flaps at a critical moment. It suggests a simple, devastating mistake. The sequence likely began right after the plane lifted off the runway. The captain, following standard procedure, would have given the command to the co-pilot to raise the landing gear by saying, "Gear up." This is a routine action performed on every single flight. The core of this hypothesis is that the co-pilot, in a moment of confusion or misidentification, may have moved the wrong lever. The lever for the landing gear and the lever for the flaps are located near each other on the central console of the cockpit. It is tragically plausible that instead of raising the gear lever, the co-pilot mistakenly moved the flap lever to the 0 or retracted position. This single action, happening at a low altitude and low speed, would have had catastrophic consequences. Retracting the flaps would have instantly taken away a huge amount of the lift the wings were generating, something the plane desperately needed to climb. Imagine you are trying to climb a steep sandy hill. The flaps are like having deep treads on your shoes, giving you the grip you need to move upwards slowly but surely. Suddenly, retracting the flaps is like switching to smooth-soled dress shoes mid-climb. You would instantly lose your grip and start sliding backward, no matter how hard you tried to keep moving up. For Flight 171, this loss of lift would have caused the aircraft to stall, not in the sense of the engine stopping, but an aerodynamic stall where the wings stop flying. The pilots would have felt the plane sink beneath them, unable to climb further. This theory explains why the aircraft seemed to struggle, flying level for a short time before it began to descend, even as the pilots likely pulled the nose up in a desperate attempt to regain altitude. It also explains why the engines were heard running. They were still working, but they couldn't overcome the fundamental lack of lift. The black boxes, especially the cockpit voice recorder, will be absolutely crucial in confirming or refuting this scenario. The cockpit voice recorder will reveal the exact commands given, the sounds of the levers being moved, and any automated warnings that may have sounded in the cockpit during those terrifying final seconds. The crash of Air India Flight 171 serves as a sobering reminder of the immense responsibilities resting on the shoulders of the entire aviation ecosystem. While air travel remains one of the safest forms of transportation, this tragedy has cast a spotlight on the state of Indian aviation. Recent reports have pointed to significant challenges, including staff shortages at key regulatory bodies like the Directorate General of Civil Aviation, and a considerable number of aircraft across Indian Airlines being grounded for technical reasons. These are not causes of this specific accident, but they form a background context that cannot be ignored. Ensuring robust oversight and adequate staffing is fundamental to maintaining safety. Despite these challenges, there is reason for optimism and a clear path forward. India's aviation sector is one of the fastest growing in the world, and with this growth comes a profound duty to elevate safety standards to be among the world's best. This incident must act as a catalyst for change, prompting a thorough review of training protocols, cockpit procedures, and the human factors that can lead to errors. It is an opportunity to invest more in safety infrastructure, strengthen regulatory bodies, and foster a culture where safety is prioritized above all else. Indian Airlines have a chance to lead, showing the world their commitment to learning and improving in the wake of adversity. Ultimately, every air accident investigation has one primary goal: to find out not who to blame, but what went wrong, so that it can be prevented from ever happening again. The lessons learned from the wreckage of Flight 171 will be shared across the globe. They will inform pilot training programs, potentially lead to changes in cockpit design, and reinforce the procedures that serve as the invisible net of safety for millions of passengers every day. The loss of 241 lives is an immeasurable tragedy, but the most meaningful tribute we can pay to them is to ensure that their loss leads to a safer future for air travel for everyone. The journey ahead will be one of grief, investigation, and introspection. It is a painful process, but a necessary one. By embracing the difficult lessons of this day, we can honor the memory of those aboard Flight 171 and reaffirm our collective commitment to the safety of the skies. The investigation will provide answers, and with those answers comes the responsibility to act. This is how we can ensure that such a devastating event does not repeat itself, transforming a moment of profound national sorrow into a legacy of lasting improvement and enhanced safety for generations of travelers to come.